Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today, we're going to have another very interesting show. I have invited on Achi Tsepal, Tibetan-born gentleman who lives in the United States, who has had an exceptional life. He'll be speaking to us about that life from being born in Tibet in the probably early 50s, but certainly traversing the Himalayas at the time of the Chinese invasion in 1959. And it's an extraordinary story, which you'll be hearing about shortly. Achi has since, after having come to the United States, served His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which also happened in India, as well as His Holiness the Karmapa, in many different types of religious and spiritual activities, setting up a meditation center, and beyond all of that. It's a really interesting, truly blessed and auspicious story. And that's not where it ends at all. He goes on to found the Children of Tibet Foundation Trust, through which he is doing remarkable work in helping children from Tibet get to live lives that are full of education and full of their own culture, as well as having an opportunity to join the modern world and be part of our lives today with all the riches and beauty and auspiciousness so many of us in the West have had a chance to experience over the past many, many years. But best that you hear it from Achi himself. This is truly a historical story, and I'm so glad and honored to bring it to all of you, my audience around the world. So Achi, Tashi Delek, so glad to have you here.
Mitchell Tashi Delek. Thank you so much, Mitchell, for this opportunity.
Absolutely. It's truly my pleasure and my honor. So please, I gave a little bit of an outline of your background, and it is truly an extraordinary story. I'm actually brought to think about the story of Trungpa Rinpoche that he wrote up in his book, Born in Tibet, where as a youth, he too, like you, was forced to escape from the Chinese who are invading your precious country, the land of snow, and come to a safe haven, which the Indians thankfully offered to the Tibetans, and found refuge in Dharamsala. So, and that too is an extraordinary story, full of the richness of Tibetan culture, wisdom, and prowess, if you will. So tell our audience, if you would, about what that was like to be born in Tibet at that time and make this sojourn into India.
Thank you, Mitchell. Yes, on the outset, I would like to just clear that I have served His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is our soul, who's the heart of mainly the Tibetan people, but also for the world, a voice for compassion and loving kindness. I have served him all my life in an unofficial capacity. I just want to make that straight with your introduction. I had an opportunity to serve him with Tenzing Tethong, the Dalai Lama's representative, then in the mid-'80s during his first official visit to Washington, D.C. in an official capacity. So I don't want the audience to misunderstand.
Sure.
But with the Karmapa, yes, the Gyalwa Karmapa, I call him the great, the natural reincarnate, Tibetan reincarnate Lama, whom, as you just mentioned, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, the Karmapa was one of his main root gurus.
Correct.
So I served him for almost 7 years. Yes, so I just want to set that straight. But yes, 80,000 Tibetans followed His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1959 after the uprising was suppressed, and after over 10 years of guerrilla warfare against the communist Chinese invasion, we were forced among 80,000 Tibetans who literally kind of, over the Himalayan mountains, who went in the direction of India to escape with their lives. And blessings to my late parents, particularly my father, who was from Eastern Tibet. And he knew where India was. And it was after 3.5 months of amazing, 3.5 months of hiding during the daytime, going blindly by night. I'm just thinking about Kabul or something like, now when people are trying to leave Afghanistan, we talk about the big aeroplanes and everybody being evacuated, but they are, I'm sure, people that are going over the mountains in the night to Pakistan.
It sounds like a simple matter, Achi, that your father knew where India was, but people have to remember that in Tibet, there weren't the same types of maps or anything about how to traverse the incredibly large mountains of the Himalayas and end up on the other side. It's, in fact, I remember, if you don't mind my referencing, Born in Tibet again, because it was a very important book in my own education. Trungpa Rinpoche, who I think was about 13 or 14 years old, but he was recognized as Trungpa in that lineage in the Kagyu. He talked about a procedure, a process, a ceremony, a ritual that was Tibetan called tagpa, if I remember. It was a prophetic practice to try to sense the direction of, in this case, India, that the group of, monks had to come together and meditate and concentrate and focus through this ritual to navigate through the Himalayas correctly.
That's right. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, whom I had also the privilege of working with during the Karmapa's first 2 visits to the West, really amazing mindfulness, meditation, the Eightfold Noble Path, the 4 Noble Truths, the first great Lama of Tibet in all his glory, in all his naturalness. Like he was like a baby, he was like a child coming to, and he was in the zoo, different zoos across America, Disneyland to
crazy wisdom teacher, right? Crazy wisdom.
Yeah. And his unique ceremony, the Vajra Crown ceremony, where we had 2,000-3,000 people. He was the first Tibetan Lama that introduced Tibet, the Tibetan culture, the core message of the Tibetan message of Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism. But you're absolutely right. Again, I know that you have studied with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a remarkable human being, a great teacher, because, like you just said, he had the knowledge of the practice of Tibetan Buddhism, recognized as a reincarnated, educated, philosophically,
he went
experiential.
To Oxford, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and then the flip side, the other wing, which a lot of modern teachers today lack, is he had the other wing to be able to really fly. He went to Oxford. He had, like people like you, when you were young, about, way back in the 70s, he was able to reach out to you to transmit the teachings in a plausible way. So yes, I was so blessed to be born in Tibet. I was about 7 years. I trekked. I had no choice, but I really kind of pride myself sometimes with my morning walks and all that. Man, I walked most of my way, 3.5 months. over the
You were
Himalayas.
7 years old when your family embarked on this journey to escape Tibet.
Yes, there's a place called Drigung. I've been back 5 times to Tibet, and it's a magical, like a true, like Shambhala. You know, the Drigung Valley, the gathering of the yogis, the yoginis, the great Drigung Til Monastery, the bio ecosystem, the rivers, the streams. I drank from those fountain heads in my village, and I remember it as a child. You know, the little berries, this famous kind of berries.
Yogi berries?
Yeah, I'm telling you, yep, they're
bet
still
they
there.
were.
And then this Milarepa's favorite diet, right? The stinging nettle. The nettle is still there. It's delicious.
Oh,
And then when I went to the
they
banks
made
of the
tea
river,
out of that, of course.
yeah, it brought back, you know, my first time in 1999. This is when I was inspired to create the Children of Tibet Trust Foundation. It's kind of got it, like, you know, something hit me, like, I'm so attached to my country, so attached to being Tibetan. I love the Tibetan plateau. I love that it's, you know, I think we go to Eastern Tibet, but Central Tibet. What can I, as a fortunate, blessed, by then I'm, you know, a happy Tibetan American, what can I do to make a difference, you know, for the future? So it's like a paradox. It's like future and now, right? So that's where the children came into being, because children are the future.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. But
and so, yeah, you just
you
mentioned India. We came to India, and then from India, a
And
famous
so
place.
just give us a little bit of a feeling, if you would, Achi, of what it was like to be 7 years old, crossing the Himalayas at that time with your family. I mean, did you have enough food? Were you cold? What was the actual experience day by day, and how long did it take you?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Many Tibetans starved to death on their journey from different parts of Tibet. You know, Tibet is now like 1/4 of what is China today. Huge, as you know, geography. So there are many books by different Tibetans, aristocrats to Kampa warriors, Eastern Tibetans, those Central Tibetans, you know. But for me, we were so blessed. We had one yak. You know, the yak husbandry is the one that truly, we discussed earlier, how the Tibetan civilization prospered and survived for thousands of years. It was the yak husbandry, right? So there's an animal called, yak. So famous yak, the yak tea. But there's an animal like a mule, a hybrid between a cow and a yak called zo. Most Westerners don't know about this. The yak is so famous, right? But the zo is like the mule they use they give a lot of milk. Sometimes they give even more milk than the yak. They use for plowing, transportation, like the yak. So it was a nalo, which is a bald-headed monk, I guess, yak that really, really made a difference in our escape, because it carried my baby brother. It carried our provisions, our tent. So 50 families and 4 monastic groups, we made a blind kind of dash, so-called secret escape. But by the time we were like 14 days going on a journey towards India, we were ambushed. So they were shot at, some lost their lives, everybody else got caught, the monastic groups got taken back, and my family was the only one. So we are talking about like 150 families altogether. And we were the only one who escaped.
Was it the Chinese that ambushed everyone?
Oh, yes. Well, it was, of course, the Chinese military. Like for my example, my parents were typical in their 30s, maybe. My mother and maybe my dad has seen, my mother, like so many Tibetans, had never even seen electricity. They had never seen an automobile, a car. Talk about landlocked, another time and space. So but your life is precious. You want to live. And when they heard that the Dalai Lama had escaped, so we made this mad dash, and it was this noble animal that took us right to the border. And I remember, even now when I see like in pictures or movies or something, like see those great mountains and range after range, valley after valley, it brings back memories as a child. It's endless, sometimes. But yeah, it was first time we got to the border.
Carrying your baby brother, your mother and your father, the four of you forged through when the other 50 families or so and the monastic orders that you were at that time traveling with got through. Were you literally in the same grouping as the Dalai Lama, or were you just sort of very far behind his group?
Oh, we were not even close to the Dalai Lama's group. We were maybe a month behind, whatever. We were completely independent caravan.
And how long did it take, Achi, to go?
It took us a total about 3.5 months. And the secret, maybe it was the Star of David, but it was a star that my dad knew that was his point, his compass, that took him to India. Yeah, because all the passes, to Sikkim, to Bhutan, to Ladakh, to Arunachal Pradesh, to Assam, every pass was blocked. The Chinese were saying to the world, well, everything's cool, no problem, the Tibetans are happy, we liberated them, whatever, but there was so much suffering and the resistance was there. And even then, CIA was involved, but that's a whole nother story to help our fight and to bring the Dalai Lama out. It was the star that my dad knew. And eventually we came down to Arunachal Pradesh, which is a similar route that the Dalai Lama took. And Mitchell, the most interesting thing, most people don't know this, but in these, pockets in the Himalayas, there were these indigenous people that were headhunters. Some of them were cannibals in the way back. They looked just like the Amazonian Indians. They were the one finally who took us to freedom. They were the ones who knew the jungle route. And I remember this so well. My dad, even then when we were suffering, we hit the wall, not the Great Wall of China, but we hit the wall of the Himalaya. And we looked up to the mountain up there, and you can see the Indian flag. I remember that. And we were told after we got over that the troops chased us right up till, it's a long story, but we don't have time today, but to the border. And it was just amazing. Like once we just crossed over to the border, I remember the Jawans are the Indian troops with their like Nehru kind of hat, the trooper uniform. And I guess one of the great saving graces, Mitchell, as a child, I was like exuberant, I was always like inquisitive, right? And here we were begging these troops for bidis. Bidis is the Indian cigarette, the Indian troop, those things rolled up, look like a little mini cigar.
Yes.
And
right, that was what was so important.
Yeah, before that, Indians, we joked about it because I never forget this. They have just a loincloth. And we were told at the border that you have to give them a bribe. First of all, by the time we crossed the Brahmaputra, we were much closer to freedom. Then there was the underground network already that were helping people to escape. Very, very, what do you call it, sophisticated. And my dad spoke both the Kampa dialect and he spoke the Central Tibetan dialect. And he was able to connect with this, underground thing. And they connected us to the
underground in India.
Underground Tibetans in the Tibetan area. Already.
I know,
but we're not in India.
But
yeah,
already over the border in India before you?
No. This is before this is the crucial point. This is before we cross the border into India. This is where the critical point. They connect you to the Lobas, the native Himalayan, very little clothes on, like an Amazonian Indian.
It's so
they say
because those same people, those Amazon style Indians in the Himalayas that virtually no Westerner knows about, who you describe as headhunters, could either have taken your head or led you happily to freedom. And thankfully, it was the latter, not the former.
Yes, yes, you're right. They're famous. These kind of across the Himalayan and closer to Yunnan and towards Arunachal Pradesh. That whole area is the mythical land of Shambhala.
Yes, of course.
You see, the totemic thing which hit from Africa broke away. It's still hitting, going, pushing the Himalayas up, right? And they have just incredible valleys. And this is where you were talking earlier, with Chogyam Rinpoche and all that.
Yes,
they wanted to open this Shambhala door, and people truly believed in this. Where Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche's prophetic and the hidden treasure, of the Vajrayana.
Yes.
But a lot of people believed in that. They really went seriously in search of those two.
Of course.
What
was represented
valleys
in the book by James Hilton, I believe is the name, of Lost Horizon, the land of Shambhala. I believe
indeed
that whole story was based on the teachings of, or at least the looking for the land of Shambhala, which later, of course, became a secularized form of Tibetan Buddhist practice under, again, Trungpa Rinpoche. And that is actually what was my entry into the world of Tibetan Buddhist practice. It was through Shambhala. Shambhala, if you're
right, Mitchell, you're right. And the Kala Chakra, the great Kala Chakra, right? Or
that's
teaching
true
that the Lama
exactly with Kala.
And so I never forget this, because this yak was like a goat. The yak could go on a beam that was across the stream. It could sure-footed. So that was a magic. And
what an amazing animal, right? An amazing being.
Amazing.
Talk about
and
service,
then finally,
right? Talk about service. We should all be like a yak.
I love animal. Yeah.
So please go ahead.
Yeah, that's why we never really went hungry. I know we could just devote a whole chapter on just this thing, but
but these details are just so precious and important to our viewers and listeners to hear about the real sort of day-to-day trials and tribulations, the struggles, and then, finally arriving in glorious India into freedom.
Yes, in some ways, truly glorious, because you see everything to do with the mind, right? I'm preaching to the choir, Mitchell. You are an advanced student, and but the whole message of, and I believe to a large extent, the whole survival of our Tibetan race and our struggle to not be Sinanized, Hanized, to survive as a culture and as a people. I think one of the main benefits for us to be able to survive, like the Jewish people, like the Jewish folks said, Jewish friends, and the story of the Jewish people and Israel is so inspiring to us, because, for thousands of years, it took them a couple of thousand years to go back to Israel. But the point is that there has to be something like the Torah or something deep spiritual. So I think the Tibetan people has a great gift to, and you're Mitchell, you are like a testimony. You are an example of what the Tibetan is doing, and therefore I truly believe we will survive, because the Buddha Dharma, what the Lord Buddha, and you say the wonderful land of India, and for Tibetans, because mentally, India was the promised land, Canaan. India was like Jerusalem or Bodh Gaya, because Bodh Gaya is there. So yes, mentally, but physically, I have to confess
Mhm.
Tibetans, it was hell for a lot of Tibetans. Thousands of Tibetans died in Musamari, Assam, because of the change of the
Climate,
altitude, climate.
altitude, and you didn't even like the food.
The food, they have to get used to a totally different food, different
Go
kind of
Valley.
culture in some way. Yeah, India, as you know, still even then had many challenges. And we were poverty stricken. I mean, it's like people lost everything, everything they owned. So we had aristocrats, we had Rockefeller kind of families, we had peasants, we had farmers, we had monks and nuns. And from all over the three provinces of Tibet come mainly to this transit camp. And people died of cholera. People died, even up till the 80s, they died of tuberculosis, typhoid. So we had those challenges, but still,
did the
mind
Indian
over matter.
government, Achi, provide some funding, shelter, food, medical types
Yes.
of facilities?
They absolutely, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru himself came to Musamari, the Tibetan transit camp, the first Prime Minister of India. And they did everything in their power to help us. And then after that, in 1960, we came out of 59, 1960, my parents, a typical example, they had the two hands, so they have no profession, no doctors, no engineers, nothing. So they went to north of Dharamsala, a place called Chamba in the Himachal, to work on the roads, hard labor, to blow up rocks, to make those highways, making at that time, 2 rupees a day. And then they were sent first Tibetan settlement, again, government of India, and particularly like different states. That Nehru was so kind, and he had met the Dalai Lama a couple of times before in 56, 54. So he requested all the different states of India to help Tibetans, to settle them, resettle them. A lot of times it was like a temporary, that we will go back. This isn't 1959, 60. So my parents were sent down to Karnataka, which is South India, what used to be called Mysore, near Bangalore. It's 7 hours by cab to Bangalore. Unbelievable settlements. And then I was a typical example. My brother and I, they lined us up. We were in Dharamsala, the first, Tibetan children's village kids. They lined us up one day, tallest at one end, shortest here, split in the middle. I got sent to Mussoorie, and my brother, unfortunately, got sent for adoption to a Swiss family. But that's a whole nother story. And I met him after, thanks to the Karmapa, after 14 years, I traced him down. Then I was so lucky, I was selected to be selected by the Dalai Lama's representative. And I say, of course, Dalai Lama, because he wanted kids to go and have the best education. And this is coming back to the Children of Tibet Trust Foundation.
Yes.
I truly, truly believe that the education that I received from the school called Weinberg Allen School, which is in Mussoorie, started in 1888, gave us the finest education. And it is a similar story, like Jetsun Pema, Tempa Tsering, Tenzin Chetung, all these current main leaders of the Tibetan diaspora, Tibetan exile government, they went to these English medium schools, do this, very special schools.
And you were selected among many, many, many other Tibetan children to attend this school. Is that correct?
Absolutely. My first sight of a Western person like you was in 1960. An Australian, his name is Mr. Kidd, blue-eyed, crew-cut, blonde guy, came with a little motorcycle up to our Tibetan children's village. And I believe later I heard that, look, I understand your suffering. I want to help, I can't help, but I will take 4 kids on scholarship. Now, this is very exclusive schools, very difficult to get in, even if you have the money. But so, so I was there till 70, and I have now contacts with our Indian brothers and sisters who finished from that year. And then after that, 4 years in college in South India, Christ College. And then I was selected by the Karmapa out of the blue to come to Bhutan for the coronation to be his, it's just amazing, amazing. I mean, you can imagine an angry young Tibetan trying to feel his way in the universe. Why me? Why me? Why did I lose my country? We didn't do anybody any wrong. And they took it from us, and, anger and,
Of course.
And no passport. We were called stateless. Mitchell, Tibetan refugees in India are called stateless. Even to this day, Tibetan refugees, when they come, they carry a passport, kind of a certificate of identity. In their nationality, they say stateless.
Oh my God. Oh, it's sort of like, if it's not one thing, it's another. On every single level, you are being disenfranchised by the powers that be, and yet in the midst of all of this, Achi, His Holiness the Karmapa, and many people in the West don't quite understand his level of position in the larger Tibetan hierarchy. But the Karmapa's lineage is among the utterly most royal. Most people know, of course, about His Holiness the Dalai Lama and that lineage, but right beside it, for those who are more educated about this, know that the Karmapa is literally on virtually the same level, so to speak, in the Kagyu. And it's remarkable that, as you were saying, you were selected by someone of that grace, that position. You over here.
Yes.
It's like being selected by Saint Peter in heaven or something.
Absolutely, Mitchell. It's like, you and I believe in transmigration of the original mind, reincarnation, rebirth, right? We believe in law of karma. So it's not surprising, but I truly believe it's many lifetimes of good karma merit that I got selected. And also on the material kind of relative level, my mother's from Surmang, same place, they're generation devotees of the Karmapa lineage. Yes. And my father, as I told you, from Dege, he's like a Nyingma. But of course, mainly average Tibetans, lineage doesn't matter. It really, the messenger, the Lama, a being who has the supreme love. That's literally the meaning of Lama. So
beautiful.
And it just changed my life. It completely changed my life. I got this letter, and when I took it to my parents and my elders, they said, Achi, pack up and get the hell out of here. He said, your life is transformed, this life and the next future life.
The next several.
He said, truly. He said, no, what are you talking about? Hesitation. Get the hell out of here. And treat yourself 5 days, 4 nights. 5 days, 4 nights. I've never been to Sikkim, never been to Bhutan, heard of it. But going back to the thing is, yes, the Karmapa, the lineage, the Kamakagyu, is the oldest kind of, the reincarnation started from the Karmapa, Tosum Khenpa, the second Karmapa. So it's over like 900 years old. And where the Dalai Lama kind of lineage sprung from. Great teacher, of course, the Gelugpa founder, Tsongkhapa, but they're like, this is like conversation in the Tibetan kind of, tit for tat kind of thing, our lineage is older and you are only 600 Gelugpas, even though you're great and mighty and you have fantastic monks and monasteries, you are just like a teenager, you're not this pious.
You're still growing up.
Yeah, and the Nyingma goes, oh, well, what Nyingma? We are just called Nyingma because we're the oldest, like Padmasambhava, so they all have kind of thing. But you're absolutely right. The Karmapa, I truly call him great, not because I served him personally and got to know him, but he was a natural, Mitchell. I don't know whether you met him or not, but he was a natural. I actually
did not. I've been up to Karma Triana in Woodstock, but he had already passed. And but I
I would
had
say he's the
friends
last of
who
them.
were
Yes.
quite close to him. So
I would say he's like the last of the Mohicans in the sense of being a true great Dharmaraja, meaning, a Lama that just his crown kind of symbolizes the aspect of being a holder of compassion, and this, that he's he's like a celestial deity. People, practice, but why I say he was great is he wasn't too lost in philosophies and metaphysics, but he had the natural presence
yes,
of a great bodhisattva. You could feel the energy. I've seen him change people in a room, and he was comfortable. He was comfortable being the Dharmaraja. He didn't
yeah,
have to pretend to be a Dharmaraja.
yeah.
He didn't have
He
to
just
strive to be a
was.
Dharmaraja. Yeah, he was.
He
He
just
is kind of,
was.
yeah.
On the level
So,
of being, right? Just like that. And of course, it should be said to those who might not be so deeply familiar with the Tibetan Buddhist traditions and practices that the Kagyu lineage is the practice lineage. And you're right, it's not so theoretical, it's not so didactic, it's not so metaphysical, it's not so intellectual, whereas the others, Nyingma, etc., are. They have elaborate psychologies. In fact, I often refer to Tibetan Buddhism as Tibetan psychology because it is so advanced. As someone in the field of psychology in the United States, Western psychology, I have relied upon Tibetan Buddhist thought and understanding of the nature of perception, etc., the nature of karma, of life, birth, and death, in my work for many decades. So it's very rich. The Kagyu, however, is sit, follow your breath, stay on the cushion,
yes.
and walk with mindfulness, and that, of course, is one of its great, great gifts to the lineage overall.
Thank you. Mitchell, you put it much better than I could ever,
Oh, I don't know about
interpret
that,
it. But you're absolutely right. Like I said, right
yeah.
from the get-go, the passport for the Tibetan people to survive, one of the critical things is the Buddha Dharma. That will benefit all sentient beings,
Very
all
true.
races on this earth.
Very
And
true.
particularly, there's a tremendous now interest on the part of the mainland Chinese. I believe over 400 million and growing that are drawn. So if we have good lamas, okay, that will protect our heartbeat, which is the Buddha Dharma, the language and the culture, and it will be relevant to the world. Like you just said, like mindfulness and meditation. In the West, how much has happened since the Karmapa first came here in 74, and then after this, of course, it's skyrocketing like Dalai Lama's Buddha activity to the West. Like now, it's like yoga, Anarata yoga. Like yoga, 6 years yogas of Naropa to basic mindfulness meditation is like a way of life in the West.
Exactly, and
right?
There is that book that you probably know. Is it called When the Swans Come to the Lake, if I recall correctly? And it's a book about the coming from the land of snow to the west of the Bodhidharma and of the teachings and the way they have taken shape in Europe, Scotland, England, and the United States. The formation of Karma Choling by Trungpa in northern Vermont, the Rocky Mountain Dharma Center out in the overall Colorado area, and on and on and on. It has just proliferated, including the temples of the Karmapa, Karmatriana up in Woodstock. And well, it just, it goes on, and many, many different teachers of several lineages have taken root in Europe and the United States, the south of France, on and on, Thich Nhat Hanh and Plum Village in France, Kalu Rinpoche also in the south of France. It's literally a veritable proliferation. I would love to
Yes.
dive in now that you have told us so well about the transition from being 7 years old and getting across, and the amazing auspiciousness around your family, almost like a halo bringing you into India. And yet all around you were people dying, which is so sad and so upsetting. And yet you and your family were able to continue to survive, and then from survival actually thrive. And then of course you came to the United States, and as you were saying so beautifully before, Achi, that in your heart, your people and your culture of birth has been so deeply important to you. Maybe now you could tell us a little bit about how that inspired you to start the Children of Tibet Foundation Trust and what you're doing inside of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitchell. Yes. Like I just said, my first visit back to Tibet was in '99. And I saw this, I went through in this village very close to where Jetsu Milarepa, the most famous yogi, maybe the most famous personality of Tibet,
Yeah.
Milarepa,
Sure.
where he meditated. They made it into kind of a touristy thing. But on my way to that sacred site, I passed through a village, was very, very typical Tibetan village then. And I passed a couple of students and children. And 2 or 3 children, and just struck me. Like, I said to myself, maybe I looked like one of these young urchins, like kids back when I was in Bikkum, right?
You probably did.
Yeah, but this is like being in Tingri area, southern like Tibet, closer to Nepal. It's more like Afghanistan terrain, more like a desert terrain, dusty kind of. It has this beauty. But the children were like, it just broke my heart. They just were, I think there were some schools that the Chinese had built and all that. You could tell when I spoke to them Tibetan or something, they looked at me like they were looking at me like, okay, this guy may be Tibetan or whatever, but it's like another planet. And I could see that. I said, we're not going to survive. You know, these kids, you can't be herding sheep and yaks forever, even if you're lucky to have one. So that's where the inspiration came, to saying that education, keeping up, adapting, like Mahatma Gandhi said, if you don't adapt, you will fail. So I realized we got to adapt. How? Is education. We have so much emphasis, in exile, diaspora, great monasteries, great universities in India, Nepal, Bhutan, especially India is amazing. But we need doctors, we need engineers, we need secular, first-rate secular. So that sort of was my inspiration. And then when I came to my village, I met my biological mother and my, sisters, 2 sisters, a brother. That's a whole nother kind of journey, a story another time, but it's just an amazing thing.
We'll have to have you next on again, Achi. This cannot be contained in one interview.
Yeah, so over there, we went to the little elementary school that the Chinese had started, and they were sort of building it. So we had a little bit of fun, and we had, my friends, Western friends. The first time I just had one friend and two Spanish gentlemen. In 2007, I had a group that wanted to go to the school, but in first instance, the school was so poor. They had the tsampa, the traditional Tibetan food, tsampa, and they had some like holes in the wall, and kids had some lump of butter and the tsampa. No blankets, hardly any living space. No, books like that. So that's how, again, my brother and everybody said, the country, the government is doing very well. They're trying to help us, but we need help. And so that's how it started. And this is truly like my realization that, again, people say, why Tibet? I mean, I'm nobody. I mean, I had a full-time job. I'm here like any other Americans, like trying to move a mountain, right? So, but even then, one drop at a time, they say it can become ocean. So I realized
Beautiful
in my
image.
mental suffering and attachment, I know Buddha says, don't be causes of suffering, samsara is attachment, but I'm so attached to being Tibetan and Tibet. So I just said, 90%, 99.5%
Some
of
attachments are
Tibetans
good.
okay, they're on the Tibetan plateau, right? We are only 200,000 in exile in the whole world, just 200,000. A lot of your audience they've reversed it. They think that most Tibetans are out and as refugees. No. So what can we do? Give up? We can surrender, give up, and say, okay, we are going to be Sinanized and Hanized and China is taken over, blah, blah, blah. Or do we do something? We do something, not political, not religious, but something on the ground to contribute, add on to help my people.
So what have you done through the foundation to help these young children in Tibet? What are the activities that you have engaged them in?
Yes, the exciting things over the years we have done is during the long winter break, which is about 3 months, my sister, who's a retired school teacher, at the request of my village folks, there are about 8 villages, there are about 2,000 households, without any kind of shaking, political and fear like that. We just tell this story like I'm telling you. I was born here. I'm Tibetan. My name is Achi, is the deity, the female principal deity of this lineage, the Dugunkayu lineage, and the main seat is there. So I'm here as a happy American, but I want to contribute something. So we've so far we have not had any problems. So we have it's a very humble, small project. In some ways, we hold it at a guest house called the Tibetan Nomad Guest House.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, it's a house that I built for my mother, but she was living in a tent when I met her, 89.
Oh.
But it was too big for her. So we converted that into like a guest house for Western friends and Chinese friends and Tibetans. And we hold this camp for 50 kids every winter for 1 month. Intensive training, Tibetan language, Mandarin, math, for 50 kids. We get 6 teachers, pay them well. We pay them well, 3,000 yuan for 1 month. Good diet. We teach them about diet and everything. So we hired 2 cooks. So it has been very successful.
Oh.
Then we have planted thousands of trees. We have, about biodiversity, nature, environment.
Wonderful.
So we peg it to the elementary school, and we give 1 tree to each child to take. We did it like in different areas. It was like didn't sustained, or the trees died. But then we discovered you take it, give it a child 2 trees, and they take it actually to their home, and they serve and take care of this living tree, and challenge their parents. Look, don't let the cow or the yak eat that, or the goat eat that. So that's been great.
That's another member of our family.
Exactly. So then the scholarship is very, very, very rewarding, because again, a lot of debate, who should we sponsor, this and that. But I do this as like my family kind of through my village, and my sister selects the most intelligent child who have an opportunity to go to mainland China for further university. So sometimes kid is brilliant, but he can't afford, before the train came and the airplanes, now there's plane, but still it costs, there's extra costs. So we give like $900 a pop, which is not much, but it helps a lot for extra expense.
Oh.
For deserving kid. We don't say the kid has to be poor, or rich, or the family connection. No, we have X amount of budget, and that has been fantastic.
But it also shows, if I understand correctly, that there is this increased and steady relationship with the Chinese. Here are your precious Tibetan children and culture, and yet there is some cooperation with the Chinese in advancing your activity.
Well, here's the thing. You're right. That's a very good question, Mitchell. There are some folks, American, big supporters, says, hey, "What are you doing up in Tibet? You're working with the Chinese. You're a traitor," kind of thing.
Right. That's why I brought this up.
You're in the wrong direction, right?
Correct.
And the others, but there's like Sonam Jamyaling, my friend in Sweden. He built about 108 schools there. When Hu Jintao was the boss in Lhasa, through the Swedish, and this is back in the early 80s. Similar story, but he also believes the same thing. We've got to do something back home. We can't, so like my logic is, when I'm able to have this interview with you because of my command of the English language, right? Now, China is China. Everybody knows China because of recent news and everything. It's China, Mandarin. Americans are going there to study Mandarin, and the world is trying to understand and study Chinese. We are like under there. We're in the tsepal bag, Mitchell. At the end of the day, Dharamsala, Central Tibetan Administration, 4 or 5 lineages, Pompo, history, past, present. The fact is, as far as I see it, we are Tibetan. We messed up ourselves. We forgot to, why look in the past, right? We theocracy, all this kind of stuff. We've lost the country. That's a fact. But we have to do something.
You have to keep the language alive. You have to keep the culture alive. Yeah. You have to keep the music and the art and the belief systems and the Buddhist teachings. This is your charge. This is your dharma, and that's just exactly the way it is. You and all of your Tibetan brothers and sisters, and those of us in the West who have an affinity, a love, affinity, and respect for what you do and what the Tibetan culture is and what it represents in the world, which is very powerful. It sits, as you well know, on the very top of the world. That's one of the phrases used to describe Tibet, the land of snow on top of the world. It's as though you are looking out at all of us and seeking to spread the Dharma, and the language needs to change in respect to every culture. It sifts down to, it drifts down to, that's fine. And there are ways of doing that. There can't be a rigidity. And that has been learned over the course of many decades as the Buddha Dharma spreads across the planet. And something I learned from Trungpa and the Dalai Lama is the idea is not that all of the rituals and all ceremonies of Tibetan Buddhist religion remain fully intact, but that they adapt to the context, the cultural context in which they're beginning to flourish. So there is a dialogue, if you will. There's a bit of a hybridization that occurs. So there's still the purity of the teaching that remains intact, because the truth at the end of the day, Achi, is the truth. And if the truth is there, it will continue no matter what the guise, if you will. And so
very well.
You are
very well put.
Continuing this historic and futuristic lineage and tradition that I think is utterly beautiful. We have run out of time, even though time is timeless. It's crazy. But I would so enjoy having you back on to go into further depth and detail of the work that you're doing, Achi, with the children, and to further elaborate the stories of Tibet for our audience, because it's so instructional and so uplifting, quite honestly, even with all of the suffering and the hardship that you, your family, and so many Tibetans have experienced. At the end of the day, you are not victims. At the end of the day, you are becoming triumphant, and you are part of that triumph, if you will, through what you're doing with the Children of Tibet Foundation. And I applaud you for this good work and would like to have you on again.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm so thrilled to be to connect with you and to tell our story. Thank you for the opportunity.
So welcome, my friend. You're so welcome. It's a true gift to our audience as well. And I also want to take a moment and thank Chris Miser, who introduced us and encouraged our doing this interview. And that's very important. He's a very good man and practitioner and cares deeply about the heart and soul of Tibet as you and I do. So
thank you, Mitchell. Exactly. You and Chris are examples of the torchbearers of the message of Tibet and Children of Tibet Trust Foundation. And Chris is he has much more knowledge and everything than me, but as far as Tibetan and the Children of Tibet Trust, he's going to be soon the custodian as I'm getting older.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. I hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. I was thrilled to hear Achi tell us of the stories of his own personal background as they morphed into an amazing evolutionary story that is instructional and beautiful for us all to hear about, and how that has then morphed into this good work of the Children of Tibet Foundation, which continues and will continue and continue. So your involvement, your participation, your donation, anything and everything, whatever way you feel you may want to participate to keep this beautiful culture alive and thriving is truly most welcome. Thank you again for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.